Counsel, call your next witness, please.
Your Honor, the petitioner calls the petitioner, Diane Calhoun Johnson. Could you please raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you please state your name?
Diane Calhoun Johnson.
Diane, how are you related to Lola Calhoun?
She's my mother.
You've been in the courtroom all day,
Yes, ma'am.
and you've heard all of the testimony.
Yes.
Can you tell me about the relationship you have with your mother?
She's my mother. I love her. With that being said, of course, we have the same mother-daughter relationship that a lot of people do. We have our moments of disagreement, but with that being said, we respect each other and love each other very much.
In fact, you moved to Florida,
Yes, I did, to be closer to my mom.
and your siblings did the same thing?
Yes, we're a very close family, so we wanted to be close to our mom, especially during her later years in life.
Did you spend time together regularly?
We spent time together every week. We would have a family dinner. We would do Bible studies together, normally on a weekly basis as well.
When your father was diagnosed with cancer, what happened to that relationship?
It was devastating. My dad, John, was the one that always made most of the decisions. So when John started getting sick, my mom was at a loss of what to do, and she just went into crisis mode.
Why did you bring this proceeding today?
Because I love my mom, and I want what's best for her, and I want to know she's taken care of and protected, especially during the last years of her life.
Cross-examination, counsel.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Johnson, you testified that you respect your mother.
Absolutely.
And as you were growing up, respect was listening to your mother and being obedient to your mother.
Yes.
And as you aged, respect was acknowledging that your mother's decisions matter.
Yes.
Now, your mother made a decision to execute a power of attorney and advance directive naming Ms. Mitchell as her agent. Do you respect your mother's decision there?
I would question if that was her decision or if she was coerced into signing that.
Do you have any evidence at all that Ms. Mitchell was behind that document being executed?
No, but I don't have any evidence that she wasn't as well.
And so you don't respect your mother's decision there?
Again, Mr. McGuffey, I respect my mother's decisions when I know they're my mother's decisions.
Okay. Did you respect your mother when you had a sheriff's deputy essentially drag her from Ms. Mitchell's home?
Objection to the
Florida?
characterization.
Counsel, don't be argumentative. Sustained.
Was it respecting your mother's decision when you forced your mother to return to Florida?
Mr. McGuffey, I love my mother, so yes, it was because I was very concerned about the care she was receiving and just her state of mind.
Did you respect the court's decision in Florida when the court decided that your mother was capable of making her own decisions?
I believe everyone can make a wrong decision.
So you didn't respect that decision?
She's my mother, Mr. McGuffey. I would do anything for her.
Now, did you respect your mother's decision after that court proceeding when your mother went back to Georgia?
Again, I do not trust that it was my mother's decision to go back to Georgia.
Let's proceed, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you raise your right hand? You swear the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Could you state your name for the record?
Rebecca Mitchell.
You are a petitioner in this case, and you've asked to be appointed the guardian of your grandmother. What was your involvement, or how did your grandmother come to live with you? If you can tell the court just how that occurred.
She wanted to come back to live with me.
So your grandmother came back to live with you. Was there a point in time when she went back to Florida?
Yes.
How did that happen?
The cops had come to the door and took her
The cops came to the door and took her. Why did they do that?
for another conservatorship that was filed down in Florida.
Okay, so they took her. Did she want to go to Florida?
No, she didn't.
And the outcome of that case, we know from the record in this case, was that it was dismissed. What did your grandmother do after it was dismissed?
She came back to live with me.
Now, when you got to Florida, did you discover that your grandmother had basically asked you to be her helper?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Petitioner's Exhibit 1 and ask you if you recognize that.
Yes, I do.
What is that document?
It is a power of attorney that my grandmother had gave me.
Your Honor, we will move for the admission of Exhibits 1 and 2 in this case.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. The witness does not appear to have any knowledge of the circumstances under which these documents were executed. She not testified to any knowledge of the execution of these documents.
Any other basis?
We have no knowledge of whether or not these documents were coerced. We have no knowledge of whether or not she had capacity at the time these documents were executed.
I believe that would go to the weight of it. From what I understand, the testimony is that these documents were given to her when she went to Florida. I'm going to ask the one foundation question. Can you recognize your grandmother's signature?
Yes.
Do these documents appear to contain your grandmother's signature?
Yes, to the best of my knowledge.
Well, to the best of your knowledge, do you recognize your grandmother's signature, yes or no?
Yes.
And do these documents contain your grandmother's signature, yes or no?
Yes.
Objection denied, documents admitted.
Now, when you were given these documents, did that, together with your grandmother's comments, cause you to believe she wanted your help?
Yes.
Did you participate in the preparation of these documents?
No.
Were you present when someone else prepared these documents?
No.
Miss Mitchell, you took your grandfather to Georgia when he was dying of cancer, didn't you?
Yes, ma'am.
In fact, he died 5 days after you arrived.
Yes.
Don't you think the travel had a significant negative impact on his life?
Possibly, yes.
Wasn't that an exercise of poor judgment?
Yes, looking back, I do believe so.
You heard the testimony of Dr. Kirtland
Yes, ma'am.
and the results of the tests.
Yes, ma'am.
You think you know more than the doctor about this subject?
No, ma'am.
But you're disagreeing with the doctor.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. We've had more than one doctor testify, and they didn't agree with each other. So I think this is argumentative.
I find it argumentative, counsel. I mean, she can testify as to her opinions, but asking her to comment on someone else's testimony and whether she's more intelligent than another witness or not, I think that's argumentative. Sustain the objection.
If your grandmother is found to have dementia and all the money she's given you is ordered returned to her, won't that place a severe financial burden on you?
Yes, it would.
You don't get along with your Aunt Diane, do you?
No.
And in fact, you've refused to allow her in your home, haven't you?
I've never stopped her from coming to my house to see my grandmother.
You've never told her she wasn't welcome in your home?
No, ma'am.
So nobody's going to testify today that you've ever said that?
No, ma'am.
You've not kept Diane and her sister and brother informed about their mother's condition, have you?
No, ma'am. I believe that was on my grandmother.
You were here when Mr. Winter testified. Do you know what the effects of these gifts will be on your grandmother's eligibility for Medicaid?
Yes.
So she will not receive Medicaid if she needed the care.
Right.
And you would have to give back the money in order for her to qualify.
Yes.
Did you know that at the time you took the money?
No, ma'am.
Did you obtain any information regarding this?
No, ma'am.
You didn't seek out any legal advice?
No, ma'am.
Now, you were serving as an agent under power of attorney?
Yes.
You've just given us the documents that have been admitted into court regarding the fact that you accepted appointment?
Mm-hmm.
When you learned that you were a power of attorney, did you obtain any legal advice regarding your responsibility as an agent under power of attorney?
No, ma'am.
So you don't know under what rules you're operating?
I do somewhat, but not.
You testify that your grandmother cares for your children?
Sometimes, yes.
Now, we heard testimony that she goes to daycare. Why is it that she goes to daycare?
I want her to have such socialization with others besides my children and myself.
Isn't it true that the reason she goes to daycare is because she's not safe at home alone?
I trust her at home.
You would leave her at home for extended periods of time?
It depends on the situation.
Well, I think we've heard testimony that she can't stand for more than 10 minutes or so at a time. And you would leave your grandmother at home for extended periods of time?
At night when she was sleeping, maybe. But
What would happen if there were a fire?
I've never thought about that.
You've not thought about what you would do in it? You've been through an emergency situation. You've been through a tornado.
Yes, ma'am.
And you've not thought about emergency planning for an elderly person living in your house?
No, ma'am.
You don't have an emergency plan?
No, ma'am.
No evacuation plan? No emergency kit with medications and doctors' phone numbers and all those sorts of things? You're in a tornado-prone area? You've not made any of this sort of planning?
I do keep her medication and her doctor's information in one spot.
In one spot, but you don't have a backpack. You're not ready in any case of emergency.
Petitioner, call your first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Petitioner calls Dr. Robert Simmons to the stand. Dr. Simmons, would you raise your right hand? You swear that the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
And we are taping for the record, and so I'd ask you to state your full name.
My full name is Dr. Robert Simmons.
And what is your experience in the medical profession?
I was trained at the Medical College of Georgia and did an internship and residency in Macon, Georgia, went to the Air Force, came to Dalton, and have practiced geriatric medicine here for 42 years.
And have you had an opportunity to examine Ms. Lola Calhoun?
I have.
And when did you examine her?
February 9th, 2015,
And where was that examination done?
at Dalton Family Practice.
And who was present during that examination?
In the room itself, Ms. Calhoun and myself only. Mrs. Mitchell, her granddaughter, was present, but outside in a waiting area and was not in the room with us at the time.
What occurred? What did Ms. Calhoun say, or what did you do?
Well, initially, I introduced myself and asked if she knew why she was there.
And did she?
She stated that she was very pleasant, by the way, and stated that she was there because she had to be.
And what happened after that?
I began to talk to her about certain things in a little bit of a questioning way, but not quite a probing way. Establish again a little more familiarity because she was a little uncomfortable in the setting. I asked her some questions about, well, in fact, I did a direct clinical review. At that point, I guess that's when I started my questioning.
What's the purpose of that review?
Well, the purpose of that review is to create a series of questions that help determine current level of function and possible capacity. It helps establish a baseline. It also gives us some idea if the circumstance is likely to improve or not.
And what did you find as you conducted your direct examination?
Well, first of all, I asked her questions about her medical condition, about what recommendations her doctor had made about her medications. And, you know, the questions sort of depend on the circumstance. They're really simply designed to see if the patient can process information accurately.
As you did this examination, did you arrive at any conclusions regarding her capacity?
I did.
And is that an opinion that you can give regarding her capacity?
Yes, there is an opinion I can give.
And is that an opinion
Just to give you an example, she had good recall of some things, and she had not good recall of other things, and some things she was somewhat confused. For instance, at one point her son had died, and at another point her son was living in Georgia. She remembered about a husband's death. She remembered a husband's death triggered her move to Georgia with her granddaughter. She remembered her daughter. But she was confused about other things, and I thought fairly important things. So I did draw a conclusion that she was at reduced capacity to make decisions about all things about herself, but in particular about command functions such as finance.
Dr. Simmons, I have a few questions about the evaluation that you performed. You spoke only with Mrs. Calhoun, correct?
In the examining room, that is correct.
And you spoke with no one else regarding her?
I spoke with her granddaughter after the exam.
So you've spoken only with Mrs. Calhoun and the respondent in this matter, Rebecca?
That is correct.
Had you ever met Mrs. Calhoun before?
I had not.
And how long was the exam that you conducted?
Approximately 1 hour.
1 hour. You asked Mrs. Calhoun about her ability to function. Is that correct?
I asked her about
her ability to perform her activities of daily living?
I did, yes.
And is it your experience that people with dementia don't understand or appreciate their deficits? Doctor, let me rephrase that. If someone has dementia, are they always aware of the fact that they have dementia?
No.
Okay. So if you ask someone with dementia whether or not they can or cannot perform a certain task, isn't it true oftentimes that an individual with dementia might say that they can do things that they in fact cannot do?
That has not been my experience.
Doctor, the aid to capacity evaluation was a test that was actually developed for clinicians to evaluate their long-term patients, was it not?
It was developed in Canada. It was developed to look primarily at medical circumstances and then has come to be used for other circumstances. So it's a very valid test, actually.
Doctor, isn't it valid when it's being administered by a patient's primary care physician who has a treating relationship with the patient and some knowledge outside the 1 hour interview?
There's no evidence that who administers the examination is relevant.
Isn't it true, though, that this is a test that was designed to be administered by somebody's treating physician?
How it was designed and how it's currently used is also on a continuum. It's been found to be a very valuable examination to use under multiple circumstances, so I disagree with you.
But doesn't it have its greatest validity when it's being administered by somebody who is a treating physician?
There's no evidence of that I'm aware of.
Yes. Doctor, so to summarize, you met with an individual you'd never met with before.
Correct.
You spent 1 hour with that individual.
Correct.
For the most part, you asked her questions and determined whether she seemed truthful in answering those questions and observed her demeanor, correct?
Except for the objective testing.
Okay. And then you administered a short test, as I said, originally developed for primary care, treating physicians. And then you corroborated that evidence with a short interview with one party in this case, reviewed no medical records, conducted no other tests among the battery of standard tests that we use for neuropsychological testing. And from the basis of that 1 hour and the brief interview and no review of any medical records, you've made a determination. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Dr. Kirtland, please state your name.
Dr. Michael Kirtland.
Dr. Kirtland, what is your professional title?
I am a neuropsychiatrist.
And Dr. Kirtland, how are you licensed?
I'm licensed through State Medical Board, both here and in the state of Massachusetts.
And you are a licensed psychiatrist?
I am.
And do you have a specialty?
Neuropsychiatry and forensic psychiatry.
And have you testified as an expert witness?
I have
before?
many times.
Many times?
Many
have you
times.
testified in this court?
I believe I have in the past, yes.
And in this case, did you conduct an evaluation of Lola Calhoun?
I did.
And as part of that evaluation, did you administer a battery of tests to her?
I did.
And did you interview witnesses?
I spoke briefly with some other people, yes.
Okay. Can you tell me who you spoke with?
I spoke with both the daughter and the granddaughter.
So that would be both the petitioner and the cross petitioner in this case.
I believe that's correct, yes.
So Diana Calhoun and Rebecca Mitchell?
Yes.
Okay. And you interviewed Lola Calhoun?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And did you also interview Lola Calhoun?
Yes, I did a full neuropsychiatric examination of her.
And as a full neuropsych examination, did you conduct a battery of tests?
Yes.
On the Wessler Adult Intelligence Scale, how did Mrs. Calhoun score?
Her score placed her in the 1% category. That is to say that she was severely impaired.
Now, 1%, that would be that she scored poorly enough that she scored worse than 99% of adults of her age.
That's correct.
So she was in the bottom 1 percentile for 92-year-olds.
Yes.
And how did she perform on the memory impairment test?
She had significant memory impairment problems. She was unable on many occasions to tell me without prompting what town she lived in and what town she grew up in.
And how did she perform on the TRAILS A and B test, the test of visual scanning and information processing?
She did equally poorly.
And again, did she fall in a certain percentile?
I believe, as I recall, she was in the bottom half percentile.
Again, in what percentile did she rank?
I don't recall off the top of my head. If I can look at my notes, I could tell you what percentile, but it was extremely poor.
Please look at your notes.
Okay. That again would have put her in the last 1 percentile.
Did you have her perform the clock drawing test?
Yes, I did. She had confusion when it came to that. The numbers themselves were done accurately, but she was confused as to how to set the hands. I asked her, to tell me what 10 after 11, to put the clock hands at 10 after 11, and she had significant confusion as to what that meant.
Can you tell the court what the importance of this result is?
Well, the significance is that from the time we're little children, we're taught how to read a clock, and so it's one of the most deeply ingrained skills that any human being, at least in an educated society such as the United States and Georgia, would have. And so it's a skill that regardless of your educational level, you should be able to perform that task.
On the progression, I understand that Alzheimer's dementia is a progressive disease. How far progressed?
She's quite far progressed. I would say that she has a severe level of dementia.
Now, is an Alzheimer's dementia of a severe level something that happens instantaneously?
Oh, absolutely not.
And so typically, how long is the onset for a dementing condition like this?
You know, there are lots of different types, even within Alzheimer's. You have early onset, later progressive. It just varies. But even in the most rapidly advancing Alzheimer's disease, it's a matter of years.
A matter of years. So one would assume that her capacity had begun to decline a minimum of...
Your Honor, I object to any assumptions that might be made. We're not here to assume, Your Honor. If counsel wants to ask a question, then I think that's appropriate, but we're not here to make assumptions.
Counsel, I'll sustain the objection, ask you not to speculate. If you can rephrase the question.
Yes, Your Honor. Do you have an opinion as to when the onset of this condition would have occurred?
I do.
And what is that opinion?
I believe that it was at least 3 to 4 years ago.
And that would make them more dependent upon the individual that they're relying on for care.
Absolutely.
Now, are you familiar with the research that shows that the relationship between the influencer and the influenced is very similar to Stockholm Syndrome?
Yes, you desire to please the individual. In the Stockholm Syndrome situation, the hostages began to identify with their hostage takers. And so you saw the exact opposite reaction of what you might expect. You would think if somebody kidnapped you, you'd resist them. But in fact, they began in that situation, now known as Stockholm Syndrome, to identify with those individuals and support those individuals. And it's been replicated many, many times, both in criminal cases and in diminished capacity cases, that you identify with the person who is abusing you rather than the more, what to the rest of us would seem logical pattern of resisting that individual.
And would you, in fact, in that scenario, state that you wanted to be with your perpetrator and that you have an affection for the perpetrator?
Yes, there are a whole series of influence situations where that's what you see. You see it in abused children. They'll often run to the adult parent who's abusing them rather than the other parent, because it is better, in their mind, it is better to go and please your abuser so that they won't abuse you, rather than to go to the person who might rescue you, because you don't know whether they'll rescue you or not, but you know if you don't please the abuser, they will abuse you. Same thing is true with a dependent adult.
You've heard the testimony of Mr. Winter in the courtroom today.
Yes.
Regarding the staggering gifts that were made by Mrs. Calhoun to members of Rebecca Mitchell's family.
Yes.
And basically has devastated her estate by distributing all of her assets.
Objection, Your Honor. I mean, if counsel wants to argue during her closing argument, she certainly has that privilege, but to characterize Ms. Calhoun's voluntary gifts, intentional gifts, as devastating.
Wait, counsel. I'm going to put an end to this quick. Counsel, your question is leading and argumentative. You use devastating and you also use substantial. Whether it's devastating or substantial is my decision. Ask your questions in a non-leading and non-argumentative manner.
Yes, Your Honor.
And counsel, you do not need to give speaking objections. Just state your objections succinctly and I will rule on it. Objection sustained.
You heard the testimony of Mr. Winter regarding the gifts made by Mrs. Calhoun to Rebecca Mitchell and members of her family.
Yes.
Do you have a concern based on the results from your evaluation that those gifts were in fact not voluntary?
I think that's entirely possible. It is impossible to know what was in her mind at the time she made those gifts. However, the pattern that I see in her situation and from what the accountant testified to, I wouldn't be surprised at all, in my opinion, that there's probably those gifts were not voluntary, but rather were intended to please the caregiver so that she would not be abandoned.
Can we agree that if an individual is capable of somewhat complex or moderately complex thoughts, and if they're capable of reasoning out what they would want to do or what they don't want to do, then a test that places them in the bottom 1 percentile or the bottom 1/2 percentile has limited utility?
No.
You heard Ms. Parker testify that Ms. Calhoun was capable of interacting with the medical staff.
Yes.
Now, you're telling us that you spent all of this time. How much time did you actually spend with Ms. Calhoun?
I believe it was about 6 hours.
Okay. During your 6 hours that you spent with Ms. Calhoun, you came to the conclusion that she's in the bottom 1/2 percentile on one test and the bottom 1 percentile on your other tests. And so I guess what I'm wondering is, how do you explain the fact that she was capable of interacting with the medical staff and going, what sounded to me like going to receive appropriate care and directing her own care?
You can interact with the medical staff and correctly give them information on very simple, specific things. I have a headache. My arm hurts. I'm tired. Those sorts of issues, which are clearly interacting with the medical staff, and which even I believe it was Ms. Parker who pointed out that at one point she said, I have a headache and I'd like some Tylenol. That's a simple interaction, but it's a correct interaction. But when you do these type of exams, first of all, that's why you do so many different tests. Each one will draw out something a little bit different. And together you see a pattern. Whereas an interaction with going to the facility nurse and saying, I have a headache, there's only one possible interaction there, and you've completed it.
Now, is it fair to say that your examination during those 6 hours was your examination, and you would be speculating regarding the progression of dementia over time from whatever beginning point it was through the date of your examination?
Based on medical statistics, yes.
And are you familiar with a prior proceeding in Florida?
I am.
Are you aware that during that prior proceeding in Florida, Ms. Calhoun, the case was dismissed and Ms. Calhoun was found to still have legal capacity?
By 2 of the 3 examiners, apparently, yes.
Do you have any knowledge based on your examination concerning how Ms. Calhoun came to be in Florida for that court proceeding and how she came to be in Georgia since that proceeding?
I have no knowledge of that, no.
And if I understood correctly, you testified that you believe Ms. Calhoun is incapable of making her own rational decision about where she wants to live.
It is normal for someone to be involuntarily taken from one location to another and be angry about being taken there involuntarily. But when you have someone who has dementias, especially of the level of this lady, you don't know what the motive for any anger they may have is. It may be that rational anger that you describe, or it may be something that has been suggested to them.
We'd call Lori Parker.
Objection, Your Honor. This witness wasn't previously disclosed.
Your Honor, as we were doing our investigation and as we were looking for ways to bring appropriate information to the court on how to structure the guardianship and conservatorship, assuming the court imposes one, we discovered this witness, and we believe that the information that she would provide is information the court could use in determining the nature of a limited guardianship.
Counsel?
She is not being called for the ultimate question of capacity.
She's being called to state her observations and interactions with Ms. Calhoun.
Is she being called for the question of capacity?
She would likely state what she has observed Ms. Calhoun being able to do and not do, her ability to engage in activities of daily living for herself, as well as any limitations that she may have observed. I do intend to ask her about her observations of Ms. Calhoun's interaction with the medical staff.
Well, counsel, as you know, this is a guardianship. It's a non-jury proceeding. You had limited discovery. Mr. McGuffey, when did you discover this witness?
Just within the last day or two.
Okay. Counsel, would you like to take some time to interview this witness before her testimony?
Your Honor, I would accept the testimony on specific ability to perform activities of daily living, but I would object to the witness being asked to testify on the ultimate question of capacity, as she's not been previously disclosed and does not appear that she has the medical qualification to answer that question. So I would have no objection to specific questions on her ability to walk, speak, things like that, but I would have objection to any questions about the ultimate question of capacity.
Well, the ultimate question of capacity is one for the court, and if this witness has information that is helpful to the court in deciding Ms. Calhoun's, whether a guardian is to be appointed over her and who that guardian should be, anything that is helpful to the court, I believe needs to be brought before me. I'm not going to let procedure over substance as it might affect Ms. Calhoun. Counsel, I will give you an opportunity. We can take a recess for you to interview the witness, ask her any questions that you desire. If you feel that Mr. McGuffey is going too far afield on matters that are not relevant, you're free to object. But I'm giving you an opportunity now to interview the witness if you so desire.
Yes, Your Honor, I'd like that.
Now, did you find any evidence of undue influence, someone essentially twisting Ms. Calhoun's arm to get them to give her any money?
Objection. This witness does not qualify as an expert in the area of undue influence, simply fraud, correct?
He is an expert in fraud. I asked, did he find any evidence as part of his review, and he hasn't answered that question yet.
And the answer is,
Wait.
Pardon me.
Wait. The objection is that
He's
he's
not
not
qualified.
competent or qualified as to the area of undue influence.
Correct.
And was this witness previously disclosed as given testimony as to the area of undue influence, counsel?
Not specifically, Your Honor. He was disclosed as a fraud expert, and I would argue that undue influence is a subspecies of fraud that this expert is qualified to testify regarding.
Well, he's already testified that he found no evidence of fraud. And that was the area of which you disclosed this witness. So if you had had any Daubert motions, you could have made them if you thought he was going to testify as to undue influence. Correct, counsel?
Correct. There was no information that this witness would testify as to undue influence. He was certified as an expert. He was disclosed as an expert in fraud and forensic examination on fraud alone.
Counsel, I'm going to limit his testimony to the area of which you disclosed him. If you wish to have this witness testify as to undue influence, you should have disclosed it prior to trial.
You know, we don't have an objection to questions regarding the testimony itself, but accusations, those would be reserved for argument.
Your Honor, the issue before us is whether or not the doctor has basing an opinion on accurate information. I think it is important for the doctor to know that the granddaughter has a bias here, has an interest in protecting certain actions that the respondent is alleged to have taken in terms of gifting her entire life savings. And the issue before us is the fact that this doctor has based his evaluation on 1 hour with Mrs. Calhoun, and then that information being corroborated by the individual who was the recipient of those gifts. I think it is important for the doctor to know that, to know that he has based his opinion on corroborating evidence by a person who has a bias and an agenda to protect the actions that were taken.
I want to tell you that...
Hold it, Doctor.
Your Honor,
Mr. McGovey, you want to
this is a contested proceeding. I think the court can assume both sides have an agenda here.
Counsel, I understand your argument. If it goes to the issue of bias of one of the parties, I think you can make that argument and we can recognize the bias. I believe you can ask the doctor if he's aware that this is a contested proceeding and whether both parties may have a bias of a certain nature. But as to whether the doctor has knowledge of certain accusations made against third parties, I do not believe that's probative as to the proposed ward's competency.
Do you have an opinion within a reasonable degree of medical certainty regarding whether Ms. Calhoun can make some decisions but not others?
I do.
What is your opinion?
Well, I look at capacity on a continuum and not as a fixed event. On a continuum, Mrs. Calhoun can do virtually all of her activities of daily living. Walking, bathing, dressing, toileting, toothbrushing, eating. On the instrumental ADLs, the other 6, cooking she can do with help, but she never cooks alone, nor does she buy the groceries. Driving a car she does not do. She can use a telephone, but with assistance. She does not shop alone. She does not manage her finances, and she is completely unable to tell me anything about her current finances. She does not manage her own medication. Her granddaughter does that for her. So the instrumental ADLs are, I think, very important in determining capacity. But as far as her total capacity, she has capacity. I just don't think she has capacity for those instrumental activities of daily living.
Do you have an opinion based on your examination of Ms. Calhoun, based on your experience as a geriatrician, as to whether she could express preferences, whether she could describe where she prefers to live and with whom she prefers to live?
Yes, I believe she would be perfectly capable of doing that.
And do you believe, within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that Ms. Calhoun could respond appropriately if she is asked who she would want helping her with finances and other activities that she cannot do herself?
Yes, I believe that.
She'd get up, go to the kitchen, fix coffee. I mean, no problem. She was quite funny. And my wife has Alzheimer's, so I can pretty well spot if there's a problem. I didn't see any problem with this lady. She had no problem holding a conversation, didn't forget words or grasp for words. In fact, she was pretty up to date on politics.
What do you mean by that?
She watched a lot of news, I guess, and she knew what was happening in this country. In fact, one day she told me, she said, Vice President Joe Biden's an idiot and Obama is running this country. He needs to be impeached. That ought to show you there she's lucid.
How does Ross Woods operate? What exactly does it do?
We're a day service program. That means that we're only open during the day. Everybody goes home at night. We're open at 6:30 in the morning till 6 at night, and you come for activity, socialization, meals, nursing care, personal care, and basically to have a really good day.
Now, how did you come to know Ms. Lola Calhoun?
Pretty much the way I get to know every family that comes. It's usually a phone call, and they call and they set up an appointment to come over and meet with me and go over the program and then do a tour. And that's how I got to know both Becky and Ms. Calhoun.
And when you say Becky, do you mean Ms. Rebecca Mitchell?
Yes.
As Ms. Calhoun was participating in the programs at Rosswoods, did you have an opportunity to observe her?
Yes, I did.
And could you tell the court what you observed about Ms. Calhoun and her ability to do things or not do things for herself?
Well, the first thing I observed is that she was pretty much fit in with everybody there, because everybody has some limitation somewhere, somehow. And her limitations were right there in the average, where she needed a little help sometimes, because she couldn't stand as long as you would want to if we had a program going on. So there's always staff there to help her. So I did see that she did need a little help with standing or walking to the bathroom. But that's pretty much everybody there.
Was she able to interact socially?
That was that's the best part of Rosswoods, is the interacting socially. Immediately, we have a buddy day. The first day she came, she had a buddy, and we literally hooked them up with friends. We make friends right away. And immediately, Ms. Calhoun was making friends with a number of the ladies and had lunch with them. And they were all very talkative and getting to know each other.
Did you observe Ms. Calhoun participating in any or a number of these activities?
Yes, especially after lunch when they get together, and there's usually arts and crafts or a baking going on or a bingo group. And she liked to go with the ladies and sit and help with the baking.
As you observed Ms. Calhoun, did she appear to be interacting in a socially appropriate way, or did she appear to be incapable of doing that?
She totally appropriate at all times, interacting, helping others, because they are often sitting around the table. Someone's mixing, if they're making brownies, someone's mixing, someone's measuring, someone's observing, and actually someone gets a taste. But she was right in there with the mixing and the measuring and helping and encouraging others that couldn't.
And does Rosswoods have medical staff on site?
Yes, we are a medical site, and there's always a nurse on site, usually 2 or 3.
And what's the purpose for that?
The purpose of that is, well, we are monitoring everybody's vitals, and a number of the people have diabetes, so we'll be monitoring their sugar there, and we do skin care, just anything that needs to be done, because we go by their doctor's orders.
Did you have occasion to see, or do you know whether Ms. Calhoun participated directly with the medical staff, or did someone have to do that for her?
I noticed one day when I was in there, because I'm usually taking pictures of everybody, and I noticed she was a little quieter than normal, and I said, what's the matter? And she said, I have a little headache. And she said, can you help me to the nurse's office, because I want to see if I can get a Tylenol. So I did, and I came back a little bit later. It was about an hour later, and she had perked up, and she felt a lot better.
So she was able to communicate directly with the medical staff?
Yes, I did not go into the nurse's office. I let her handle that.
Counsel, I believe he needs to be sworn. Will you administer the oath?
Thank you, Your Honor. You raise your right hand. You swear the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
And have you had occasion to meet Ms. Lola Calhoun?
Yes, I have.
And how did that occur?
Well, I'm the minister at Third Avenue Baptist Church, which she attended. And after the tornado destroyed her granddaughter's house, I got to know her because I rented them an apartment.
Where was that apartment?
Dalton.
Okay. And in the course of your interaction with Ms. Calhoun, did it appear as though she was being well taken care of, or did she have the ability to do things for herself?
Oh, yeah. I would go by and see her maybe once or twice a month, and she'd get up and go to the kitchen, fix coffee. I mean, no problem. She was quite funny. And my wife has Alzheimer's, so I can pretty well spot if there's a problem. I didn't see any problem with this lady. She had no problem holding a conversation, didn't forget words or grasp for words. In fact, she was pretty up to date on politics.
What do you mean by that?
She watched a lot of news, I guess, and she knew what was happening in this country. In fact, one day she told me, she said, Vice President Joe Biden's an idiot, and Obama is running this country. He needs to be impeached. That ought to show you there she's lucid.
When John was in the hospital, did your niece then arrive in town?
Yes, she did. And that's a strained relationship as well, so it brought another level of, just another element to the situation that was already a difficult situation just with John being diagnosed with cancer and his health failing.
Was that element the strained relationship between you
It
and
was.
Rebecca? Was it almost like you were jockeying for your mother's affection?
Yes,
Do you believe that Rebecca felt she was in some sort of competition with you?
absolutely.
And what happened when John was discharged from the hospital?
My siblings and I were blindsided. Rebecca took my mom and my dad to Georgia, and we had no knowledge of it at all.
So she didn't tell you in advance that she was planning to do that?
Absolutely not. We were blindsided by the whole thing, and I didn't even know where my mom was, or I didn't have any knowledge at all.
So they just disappeared?
When they were discharged, yes. We didn't even know that he was being discharged.
And so suddenly your father's out of the hospital and nowhere to be found?
Correct.
Do you have concerns about the gifts that she has made to your niece?
Absolutely. Because they're to benefit Rebecca. And that was mom and dad's money. That should be in place to last as long as she lives.
So you have concerns about the fact that that money is no longer available to her?
Correct.
Counsel, call your next witness, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Winter, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And we're recording, so would you state your full name for the record?
Larry Eugene Winter.
And Mr. Winter, what is your occupation?
I'm a certified public accountant.
And how many years have you been a certified public accountant?
42.
And do you have other specialties or fields of expertise?
I am also board certified as a certified valuation analyst, a certified fraud examiner, and a personal financial planning specialist.
Have you had an opportunity to review Ms. Calhoun's finances?
Yes, I have.
What have you done in reviewing her finances?
Well, I received the history of various bank statements, which included the disbursements that were made by her, and also monies that were held by investment houses on her behalf.
And have you had an occasion to see what her finances were like prior to moving from Florida versus what has happened since she has moved to Georgia?
At the time she moved to Georgia, she had about $280,000 worth of assets, and she has dispersed much of them since moving here.
Mr. Winter, in the course of your review, did you have occasion to evaluate Ms. Calhoun's monthly income and her budget?
I did.
And did you arrive at any conclusions regarding her ability to pay her own way?
Yes, with the death of her husband and the loss of his Social Security check, by moving to Florida, from Florida to Georgia, she actually saved money because she, in living with her granddaughter, no longer had the monthly expenses relative to a home. Her granddaughter was driving her around. She didn't have a car payment, car insurance, gasoline, etc. So by eliminating those expenses, her monthly income actually went up.
Do you have an opinion based on your examination of the records, based on your experience, as to whether there is any evidence of fraud regarding Ms. Calhoun's finances?
Well, let's define the word fraud if we can.
How do you define the word fraud?
Fraud is a material false statement made with an intent to deceive, coupled with the victim's reliance on that statement and damages. I have not found any fraud. I was concerned about the concept of fraud because it certainly had been alleged. So was able to look to the court records from Florida. And the Florida courts dismissed the action after a lengthy hearing. The record was replete with evidence. So it was presumed that she could make decisions at that time because the court allowed her to return to the state of Georgia.
And is, for your purposes, or for the purposes of your review, is that the significance of the Florida case?
Yes.
Mr. Winter, I want to ask you about the nature of the gifts that you've examined. The gifts that were made to Ms. Mitchell for the purchase of a car and for furnishing a home, did those benefit Ms. Calhoun?
Certainly.
How did they benefit Ms. Calhoun?
As I testified earlier, by living with her granddaughter, she eliminated the costs of having residence. And so she didn't have to pay rent or a mortgage payment or utilities or insurance and so on, because they were all provided for, and those gifts are what made it possible. If the gifts hadn't existed, the granddaughter wouldn't have had a home, wouldn't have had furnishings.
So we could say Ms. Calhoun was furnishing her own home.
We can say that she furnished the home that she lived in.
Mr. Winter, it's your testimony that by living with a family member, Mrs. Calhoun's budget became more affordable because she wasn't paying rent and she had transportation and assistance?
That is correct.
And that could have happened if she lived with her daughter as well.
Would agree with that statement.
So she could live with any family member and experience the same improvement of her financial condition.
Any family member that she chose.
Well, just say any family member could provide the same financial benefit, correct?
I will say any family member that she chose.
So if it was someone she didn't choose, she wouldn't receive a financial benefit?
Then she wouldn't be living with them, would she?
No, my question was not choice. My question today is just objectively. If Mrs. Calhoun were to reside with any family member that would provide the same services that her granddaughter Rebecca has been providing, regardless of choice, regardless of decision, the fact that she lived with any of them who provided the same services, she would receive the same financial benefit, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. You're a financial planner?
Yes.
And do you work with people who are preserving a budget in retirement?
Yes.
Now, would it be typical as a financial planner when you're working with someone who's on a fixed income of $1,200 a month, would you recommend that they give away all their money?
Well, that wasn't placed before me. What was placed
My only
before me.
question
No,
right
let
now
me
is-
answer your question first, and then you can ask another one. That was not what was placed before me. What was placed before me was what did she do with the money that she had. You're now asking me a second question of what do I see? And the answer is I see a huge spectrum. I see family members that are very much afraid of what's going to happen to them, that move in with other family members and they'll upgrade a house, much as we see in this instance. I see them shepherding their money very closely to the end, and I see everything in between. And because it's really dealing with more than economics, it's dealing with the fears and the desires of the person who has money as to how they believe they are best provided with, is what makes that determination, not economics. I've never seen economics drive that decision.
But that's not what I asked you. What I asked you was, would you advise a client to do that? To give away all their money when they're on a fixed income?
No, instead of advising, I listen. That's one where you have to listen to the family and to the family member as to what they're doing.
So if Mrs. Calhoun were to fall tomorrow and break her hip, and she were unable to reside with her granddaughter any longer, and she were required to live in skilled nursing for the remainder of her life, would these gifts cause a problem for Medicaid eligibility?
Mainly for her granddaughter, yes.
Well,
Because her granddaughter would have to replenish them or make what Medicaid is not going to pay. So the answer is it can cause a problem if the granddaughter can't make the estate, I'm going to use that term loosely, whole. That is correct.
well, it's not the granddaughter that wouldn't get the care that she needs, is it?
Again, the granddaughter, I think, would be forced to do something.
Well, couldn't the granddaughter just walk away and wash her hands of the situation, and Mrs. Calhoun would be the one who would be stuck trying to qualify for Medicaid? Isn't that the way the rules work in Georgia? That they don't penalize the granddaughter, they will penalize Mrs. Calhoun. She will be the one who will not receive the care she needs because of these gifts. She is the one who will receive the letter from the state of Georgia telling her that she does not qualify for Medicaid because these gifts have not been returned.
That's the initial step, yes.
So it is Mrs. Calhoun who will suffer from the imprudence of these gifts.
Well, your statement is taking it on to other conclusions in terms of she is going to suffer and that the gifts were imprudent.
Well, my question today then is, do you have a crystal ball with you so that you can look into that crystal ball and tell me that for certain in the next 5 years, Mrs. Calhoun will not experience an adverse medical event that will require her to live in skilled nursing, despite the fact that she is nearly 93 years old?
Neither of the two of us have that crystal ball.
Right. So you can't say that this won't happen.
No, nor can you.
No. But we can presume it's more likely to happen for a woman who is 92 than for a woman who is 62, correct?
Again, I don't have that crystal ball and you don't either. So we both agree as to that.